I stood at the front of the sunlit pavilion, tugging at the collar of my suit and willing my racing heart to steady. Friends and family sat in neat rows before me, murmuring in anticipation of the ceremony about to begin. White roses and satin ribbons adorned the aisle, the picture of romantic renewal. On the surface, I wore a calm, even hopeful expression, the face of a forgiving husband ready to reaffirm his vows. But beneath that facade, a storm of emotions churned. My palms were sweating not from nerves over renewing my marriage, but from the adrenaline of revenge. Across the pavilion, I caught my daughter Alicia's eye. At 18, she was fierce and perceptive, far more mature than I'd been at that age. She gave me the tiniest nod, her lips pressed in a thin line of encouragement. She alone knew the truth of what I was about to do. Everyone else, the smiling guests, my wide-eyed in-laws, even my unsuspecting wife, thought this was a ceremony of forgiveness and reconciliation. If only they knew. A string quartet began to play softly. I turned to watch as my wife, Darlene, emerged at the end of the aisle. She looked radiant to everyone else, dressed in an elegant ivory gown, hair swept up gracefully, clutching a bouquet of fresh lilies. To me, the sight was almost laughable. Lilies, how fitting, I thought darkly. Flowers often brought to funerals. In a way, today would mark the death of our marriage, not its rebirth. Darlene's eyes were already shining with tears of joy as she met my gaze. She truly believed this was a new beginning for us. I forced myself to smile gently. My heart thumped against my ribs with a mix of anger and grim anticipation. As she began her slow walk toward me, I could not help recalling another day, another walk, when our lives veered violently off course. I closed my eyes for a moment, and the memory engulfed me. 1 year ago, I was a different man. I was a devoted husband of nearly 20 years, living a comfortable life in urban Illinois with a wife I adored, and a daughter who was the light of my world. Darlene and I married young, and we'd built a life brick by brick, careers in education, a warm home, and our beautiful, headstrong daughter, Alicia. At 45, I considered myself a happy man. Sure, the routine of marriage had settled in, and the heat of our youth had cooled to a steady warmth. But I never doubted Darlene's love or loyalty, not even for a moment. Looking back, there were signs I missed. Darlene had grown restless that autumn. She spent more time at school events and committee meetings, often coming home late with a peculiar light in her eyes. She had a new eagerness about her, a spark I hadn't seen in years. Naively, I thought maybe she'd found a renewed passion for her job as a literature teacher at the local high school. I even felt proud. Her dedication to students was one of the things I admired about her. But there were other red flags. She guarded her phone with a new intensity, smiling at messages she never shared. Our conversations grew shorter. At night, she rolled away from me in bed, lost in private thoughts. When I'd ask if everything was all right, she'd force a smile and say, "Just tired, Michael. Work has been taxing." I wanted to believe her. God help me, I wanted to believe her so badly that I ignored the gnawing pit in my stomach. Until the evening, I found undeniable proof. It was a chilly Friday in late November. I remember because I'd come home early, hoping to surprise Darlene with takeout from her favorite Thai place. I walked into our bedroom quietly, a playful idea in mind to maybe kindle some romance. But Darlene didn't hear me. She was in the master bathroom with the door half open, and she was on the phone. "I can't wait either," I heard her say in a low, excited whisper. I froze just outside the bathroom door, my heart suddenly hammering. This weekend will be everything we talked about. I booked the hotel by the lake. Yes, the one with the jacuzzi suite. Her tone was breathy, girlish, so unlike the weary, detached voice she'd lately used with me. My breath caught. Weekend. Jacuzzi suite. My mind raced. We had no trip planned together. What was she talking about? Before I could make sense of it, she continued, voice dropping even lower. I told him it's a work conference out of town. He doesn't suspect a thing. A small, giddy laugh. No, he won't find out. By Monday, it'll be like nothing happened. I felt as if the floor had vanished beneath me. She was talking about me. My brain struggled to process the obvious truth. My wife was arranging a secret tryst. The affectionate, loyal woman I shared my life with was lying to my face and planning a weekend of passion with someone else. A surge of nausea rolled through me, and I steadied myself against the wall, dinner bag crinkling in my hand. I love you too, Darlene almost purred into the phone, and then I heard the telltale beep as the call disconnected. In that instant, something inside me shattered. My hands were trembling with shock and fury. I stepped away from the door, afraid of what I'd do if I saw her face to face right now. I must have made some noise because the bathroom door swung open. Darlene emerged, startled to find me home. Her eyes flicked to the takeout bag in my hand before meeting mine. There was a brief flash of guilt or fear in her expression, but she masked it quickly. "Michael, you're home early," she said, voice high-pitched. "I didn't hear you come in." She attempted a smile that didn't reach her eyes. I stood there, heartbroken, still holding that ridiculous bag of lukewarm Thai food. "Work ended early," I managed to say softly. My voice sounded hollow. I couldn't confront her, not yet. I felt physically ill, like I might vomit or burst into tears or both. I needed to understand everything first, to plan. So instead of exploding, I forced a neutral expression. "Thought I'd surprise you with dinner." She looked relieved, maybe thinking I hadn't overheard. "That's so sweet," she said, coming forward to kiss my cheek. I flinched, perhaps imperceptibly, but she noticed. She paused, uncertain. The smell of her perfume, once comforting, made my stomach turn. I cleared my throat, mind racing. If I tipped my hand now in anger, she might simply deny everything. She might still go on that trip and cover her tracks better. And I'd be left with nothing but her lies. I needed proof and a plan. Swallowing the bile in my throat, I resolved to play along for the moment. Over dinner, I pretended to be preoccupied with a work issue, barely tasting the pad thai on my plate. Darlene chatted about mundane things. Bridget, our niece, winning a spelling bee, a new textbook order at school, her voice overly cheerful, eyes flicking to me as if gauging whether I was suspicious. I responded with grunts and nods at appropriate intervals, but my mind was elsewhere entirely, piecing together clues. Who was the person on the phone? She'd said the vice principal earlier. Was it him? A memory surfaced. Garrett McDonnell, vice principal of Westbrook High, my wife's boss, a man I'd met a handful of times at school functions. Mid-50s, stern-faced, with a predatory smile that always made me uneasy. I remembered the rumors among parents. McDonnell had a wandering eye, especially for younger female teachers, and even some of the senior students. I'd dismissed it as gossip. Surely Darlene wouldn't. Not with him. But the more I thought about it, the more the pieces fit. He was her superior, and they'd been spending long hours on the curriculum committee, or so she claimed. The late meetings, the new sparkle in her eyes. God, Had it all been because of him? I clenched my fist under the table so hard my nails bit into my palm. Throughout that torturous meal, I maintained a mask of ignorance. Inside, a mixture of rage and grief was building to a breaking point. After dinner, Darlene stood by the sink rinsing dishes. I walked up behind her, needing to feel something, maybe hoping I was wrong. I slid my arms around her waist. "I love you," I said quietly, my cheek against her hair. The simple truth of those words ached in my chest. Part of me still prayed she'd confess, say she'd made a horrible mistake, anything to stop the course she'd set. For a second, I felt her tense. Then she patted my hand distractedly. "Love you too, hun," she replied, but her voice lacked warmth. She slipped out of my embrace on the pretext of wiping a plate dry. The distance between us in that moment was more than I could bear. That night, Darlene fell asleep easily. If she felt any guilt, it certainly didn't keep her up. I, however, lay awake for hours staring at the ceiling, mind racing through scenarios. Anger thrummed in my veins, but I also felt an overwhelming sense of loss. The life I thought I had was already gone, and she hadn't even packed for her sordid weekend yet. Eventually, I slipped out of bed and went downstairs to the den. In the darkness, I allowed silent tears of betrayal to slide down my cheeks, unseen by anyone. My world was crumbling, but in that black solitude, a steely determination began to form. I wasn't going to be the pathetic, clueless husband cheated on behind his back. No, I would not. If Darlene was so eager to throw away our marriage for a thrill, then I would catch her in the act and make sure she regretted it for the rest of her life. The next morning at dawn, I quietly left the house and drove to a nearby park, cell phone in hand. Sitting in my car under the gray light of early day, I called a number I never thought I'd need, a private investigator. The PI, recommended discreetly by a friend some years ago during his own divorce, listened as I tersely explained, I suspected my wife would be with another man that weekend. We arranged for him to follow Darlene when she left town and collect evidence, photos, hotel records, whatever he could get without being detected. It felt extreme, but I knew hard proof would be my weapon later, both legally and emotionally. By the time I returned home, I had also phoned an attorney friend, Tyler, to set up an urgent meeting. If Darlene wanted to break our marriage, I would make sure I controlled how it broke apart. I wasn't going to let her blindside me in court or steal our finances on top of stealing my heart. When I walked back into the kitchen, Darlene was bustling about making coffee as if it were any other Saturday. She glanced at me with a tight smile. "You're up early. Couldn't sleep?" she asked. There was genuine concern in her tone, perhaps the remnants of the wife she used to be. I simply shrugged. "Lot on my mind." I didn't elaborate. How ironic that she might assume it was work or bills when she was the one weighing on me. She didn't press further, thank God. Instead, she said, "I have that teacher certification seminar this weekend, remember? I'll be driving upstate after lunch. I'll be back Sunday night." Her voice was steady, rehearsed. She couldn't even look me in the eye as she lied. My jaw tightened, but I forced a neutral reply. "Right. The seminar," I murmured. "I remember." In fact, I remembered clearly how she had concocted this excuse a week ago and fed it to both Alicia and me with a straight face. At the time, I'd thought nothing of it. Teacher trainings were common enough. Now I recognized it as part of her elaborate cover story. Darlene sipped her coffee, then added, "There's food in the fridge for you and Alicia, and, her friend Tilly's mom will give her a ride back from the debate tournament tomorrow." She was over-explaining, perhaps to mask her nerves. I just nodded, heart pounding in anger that she was even coordinating our daughter's schedule around her infidelity. Upstairs, I heard Alicia moving around, likely getting ready for the day. Thank goodness our daughter hadn't come down yet to hear these lies. Alicia idolized her mother. Had idolized, I should say. That would all change soon, and the thought of our daughter's impending heartbreak was almost more than I could handle. But it was Darlene who was responsible for that, not me. She made these choices, not us. I spent the rest of that morning quietly gathering my own documentation. While Darlene took a shower, I accessed her laptop and found her personal email. She had foolishly saved her password in the browser, and within seconds, I was reading a chain of messages between her and Garrett McDonnell. My stomach clenched as I scanned their exchanges from the past month. Explicit discussions of sneaking around, declarations of excitement, even nude photos she'd sent him. I felt physically sick as each new line confirmed the depth of her betrayal. But I dutifully saved everything, forwarding the emails to a new account I'd made, screenshotting conversations, saving the photos. It was gut-wrenching, but I steeled myself by remembering this evidence would ensure neither of them could worm their way out of consequences. At one point, I discovered they had planned to meet not far from here, a lakeside lodge 2 hours away. She had paid for the reservation with our joint credit card. Bold, I thought bitterly. She was charging her adultery to our family account. That detail especially stung. She was literally spending our shared money on him. I made a mental note to call the credit card company soon and separate my accounts, but not until after the PI had a chance to get the hotel bill as proof. By late morning, I had assembled a trove of incriminating data. I transferred it all to a flash drive and tucked it into the inside pocket of my jacket for safekeeping. Then I texted my lawyer friend Tyler. "It's confirmed. I need to start divorce proceedings immediately. Also advise on financial protections." He replied almost instantly to come by his house that evening, as it was a Saturday and his office was closed. Good man. As I snapped my briefcase shut, Alicia poked her head into the study. Her dark eyes studied me curiously. "Dad, everything okay?" she asked. I must have looked as weary and grim as I felt. I managed a small smile for her. "I'm all right, Pumpkin. Did you need something?" She hesitated, then stepped in and closed the door gently behind her. "Mom told me she's going to some seminar. I don't believe her." My breath caught. "Why not?" I asked carefully. Alicia bit her lip. "She's been acting weird, and I overheard a bit of her phone call last night. She was saying how you'd never find out something." My perceptive girl had put some pieces together herself. She looked at me with a mixture of worry and anger. "Dad, is Mom having an affair?" Hearing those words from my daughter's mouth broke something in me. I sank down into the desk chair and covered my face with both hands. I had hoped to shield Alicia until I could handle things, but there was no protecting her from this reality. She deserved the truth. "Yes," I said quietly, voice strained. "I believe she is." Alicia inhaled sharply, then came to me and hugged me tightly. I felt her small frame shudder. She was crying. "How could she do this to us?" she whispered fiercely. I hugged her back, stroking her hair. "I don't know, sweetheart. I don't understand it either." My own tears threatened, but I held them back for her sake. "But I promise you, I'm going to take care of this. I won't let her get away with destroying our family without consequences." She pulled back and wiped her eyes, face hardening with resolve. Good, she said, with a maturity far beyond her years. She can't just break our hearts and walk away like it's nothing. I was both heartbroken and proud in that moment. Heartbroken that my daughter had to confront her mother's betrayal. Proud that she stood firmly with me, righteous anger in her eyes. I realized that in this, Alicia would be my ally. We would get through it together. Downstairs, Darlene called out that she was leaving soon. Alicia and I exchanged a look. She whispered, "Make her regret it, Dad." It almost startled me, the venom in her tone. I nodded solemnly. I intended to. We both went downstairs. Darlene had her small rolling suitcase by the door. She was dressed in casual jeans and a sweater. Ironic how innocent she looked, like a mom headed out for a teacher's workshop. The sight of that suitcase made my blood boil, but I forced myself to appear neutral. Alicia stood stiffly beside me. "You're really going then?" she said to her mother, voice trembling with contained emotion. Darlene sighed and reached out as if to touch Alicia's arm, but our daughter pulled back. "Honey, I'll be back Sunday night," Darlene said, an irritated edge creeping into her voice. "It's just a couple days. There's food, and your dad will be here. It's no big deal." No big deal, no big deal. My hands balled into fists at my sides. Alicia's face went red with anger. "Mom, please don't do this," she burst out. "Don't break our family for some stupid fling." Darlene's eyes widened in shock. Clearly she hadn't realized Alicia knew. Her gaze darted to me, but I remained stony and silent. She quickly switched to damage control. "Alicia, you don't understand." "I understand perfectly," Alicia snapped, tears forming in her eyes. "You're cheating on Dad, and you're running off for a dirty weekend like a selfish coward." "Alicia George Carter!" Darlene's voice cracked like a whip, a mother's tone of reprimand, but I could hear it falter. Guilt flashed across her face. "I will not be spoken to that way. This is between your father and me." I stepped forward then, placing a protective hand on Alicia's shoulder. I leveled my wife with the coldest stare I'd ever given her. "It stopped being just between us when you decided to involve our daughter in your lies," I said quietly. My calm tone belied the rage simmering underneath. "You've told her for a week now that this is a work trip. Lying to her was your first betrayal, but not the last." Darlene's composure fractured. She looked from me to Alicia, seeing only anger and disappointment reflected back at her. Her eyes welled with tears. I never meant to hurt you," she whispered. "Then don't go," Alicia pleaded one last time, voice breaking. "Please, Mom, don't do this. If you love us, if you love Dad, stay here and work it out. Don't throw us away for nothing." For a brief moment, I saw genuine conflict in Darlene's face. A tear spilled down her cheek. She did love us, in her flawed, twisted way. I truly believe she did. But something dark and selfish had taken hold of her these past months, and it wasn't letting go. She brushed the tear aside and squared her shoulders. "I need this," she said, as if convincing herself. "I'll make it up to you both, I promise. I just—" "Enough," I cut in, my voice sharp as a knife. I had heard all I could bear. "Just go, Darlene. Do what you're going to do." She opened her mouth, perhaps to beg my understanding or offer more empty reassurances. But I was done listening. I opened the front door and stood beside it in silence. The message was clear. Darlene's lips trembled. She lifted her chin and grabbed the handle of her suitcase. We'll talk when I get back," she said, a pathetic attempt at normalcy. I did not answer. Alicia turned her back, unable to watch. As Darlene stepped over the threshold, I allowed myself one final parting shot, delivered in a low growl only she could hear. When you walk out that door, you are not my wife. She paused, eyes wide and wounded. For a split second, I saw regret flash in them. Real, terrified regret. But it was too late. She had made her choice. Without another word, Darlene walked out to the driveway. Through the open door, I saw a car idling at the curb. My jaw clenched painfully. Leaning casually against the driver's side was Garrett McDonnell. Even from a distance, I recognized his smug posture and that arrogant tilt of his head. The bastard hadn't even bothered to hide, showing up brazenly at my home to collect my wife. Darlene hurried toward him, pulling her suitcase behind. Garrett gave her a grin and popped the trunk. At that moment, he glanced up toward the house and, to my surprise, met my gaze through the doorway. We stared at each other across the crisp autumn air. I can only imagine what he saw on my face. Grief, fury, hatred. His grin faded for a moment. Then, in an act of sheer audacity, he raised one hand in a little salute. As if this were a friendly exchange and not the destruction of my family playing out. It took every ounce of willpower not to sprint down the driveway and beat that man senseless on the spot. My body trembled with the effort of restraint. I knew if I lost control now, I could jeopardize everything. My custody of Alicia, my carefully laid plans, even my own freedom if violence led to police. He simply wasn't worth it. Not yet, a cold inner voice amended. Instead, I lifted a hand in return, mimicking his salute. Only mine was a middle finger extended in unmistakable promise. I saw his cocky expression falter as Darlene obliviously climbed into his passenger seat. Good. Let him wonder what I had in store. I shut the front door with measured calm. Then I turned and immediately caught Alicia in a fierce hug as she broke down, sobbing. How could she do this to us, Dad? She choked out against my chest. My own tears finally flowed then. We sank to the floor together in the entryway, holding each other as our world collapsed. I had never felt such pain, but under that pain, an iron resolve formed. I would not let this betrayal go unanswered. That evening, after I'd gotten Alicia settled at my brother Dave's house, she insisted she wanted to stay with her cousins rather than endure the empty home that night. And I agreed. I met with Tyler, my lawyer friend. We sat in his home office, the mood somber. I laid out everything, what I'd overheard, the evidence I'd gathered, and my intent to file for divorce immediately. Tyler listened, occasionally nodding or asking a clarification, but mostly letting me spill my tale. As I recounted Darlene's words and actions, the disbelief on his face mirrored my own lingering shock. You have a solid case for an at-fault divorce on grounds of adultery, Tyler said when I finished. His professional tone was calm, but I saw anger on my behalf in his eyes. We'd known each other since college. He and his wife were close with us. This betrayal rippled through our entire friend circle. Illinois is no fault, but we can still cite adultery in the petition to set a narrative. It might influence things like custody and any settlement negotiations. Especially if we negotiate privately, Darlene may not want a public record of her affair. I want full custody of Alicia, I said immediately. I won't have my daughter living with her and whatever men she brings home. My voice quavered with protective rage. I knew Alicia would choose to stay with me anyway. She had essentially said as much, but I wanted it legally insured. Tyler nodded. Given Alicia is nearly an adult, the court will heavily weigh her preference. And from what you say, she's firmly on your side. I doubt Darlene will contest custody much if she knows her daughter is furious with her. He made a note. Financially, we should act fast. Have you separated your bank accounts yet? Not yet, I replied. I was waiting until she finished her little trip so she doesn't notice and panic. Smart, he said. First thing Monday, we'll file a temporary restraining order on assets, prevent her from cleaning out accounts or running up credit. In fact, might be wise to freeze the joint credit cards now before she charges more this weekend. A grim smile tugged at my lips. Already done, I said. I had called the credit card company on my drive over and reported our main card stolen. An easy way to freeze new charges. Darlene and her lover would be unpleasantly surprised when their hotel tried to run that card. I imagined them scrambling, perhaps forcing Garrett to pay with his own money. It was a small, petty victory, but satisfying nonetheless. Tyler raised an eyebrow, impressed. All right, we'll draft the divorce petition to serve her as soon as possible. As for evidence, I handed him the flash drive. It's all in there. Emails, messages, photos of them at the hotel if my PI comes through this weekend. I'll forward you anything he sends me. My voice hardened. I want her to have no room to deny or spin this. She doesn't get to cry and play victim later. Tyler placed a reassuring hand on my shoulder. We'll make sure of it, Mike. Take care of yourself and your daughter this weekend. Once she's served, the process can get ugly. But you're doing the right thing protecting yourself. I left his house feeling marginally better. At least there was a plan in motion. But I still had an aching hole in my chest. That night, I found myself in an unfamiliar bed. I checked into a hotel downtown. I couldn't stand sleeping in our matrimonial bed, knowing she had been with him in some other hotel that very night. It felt tainted. So I lay in a sterile room, staring at the ceiling, alternating between anguish and anger. She chose to do this. She did this to us, I repeated in my head like a mantra, fueling the fire that kept me from drowning in sorrow. On Sunday evening, Darlene returned home to a dark house. She wasn't expecting me or Alicia. She'd texted earlier claiming to be staying an extra night because of some fictional conference extension. She didn't know that I knew the truth, that we had preemptively vanished. In fact, Alicia and I were already on a plane to Florida by then. I had decided a change of scenery would do us both good, and with Darlene set to be served divorce papers the next day, I wanted to avoid any initial confrontation. So I'd quietly arranged a week's getaway for just my daughter and me, using some emergency savings. I left a single note at home for Darlene. Do not contact us. Wait for my attorney. Short and not so sweet. It was taped to the inside of the front door, where she couldn't miss it. I later learned from a neighbor that on Sunday night Darlene pounded on the locked doors and windows of our house, shouting in confusion and panic when her keys didn't work. I had indeed changed the locks that morning before heading to the airport. She must have eventually found the note, because my phone logged a flurry of messages from her. Stunned, pleading, then angry. I didn't read them. I forwarded them to Tyler and blocked her number. If she wanted to talk, she could talk to my lawyer. That week in Florida with Alicia was somber but healing in its own way. We walked along empty winter beaches, talked for hours, and cried together more than once. Each night I assured her that none of this was her fault, and that we would build a new life on our terms. Each night she assured me she would never forgive her mother for what she'd done. We were a small, wounded team, but a team nonetheless. During that week, the legal gears began to turn. Darlene was officially served with divorce papers on Tuesday at her workplace, an embarrassing moment for her, no doubt, to be confronted with a process server in front of colleagues. She didn't even have the chance to return to our home. I'd made sure to secure a temporary order granting me exclusive use of the house for now. Her belongings, what she hadn't taken for the weekend, were packed and stored in the garage. I had no desire to see her, so I authorized Tyler to arrange with her attorney for a time to retrieve them under supervision. By the time Alicia and I returned home, all the locks had been changed and every trace of Darlene removed from the main house. The silence was heavy, but at least there was no ghost of her in our space. It was just us now, and we'd make do. The next months were a blur of legal proceedings and raw emotions. Darlene oscillated between fury and desperate remorse. Through attorneys, she first denied the affair. Then, when we dropped the mound of evidence on the table, she changed tack to apologetic. She wrote me long letters, which I left unopened or skimmed at best, claiming she'd made a horrible mistake and that she still loved me, loved our family, and wanted another chance. I did not respond. I was not interested in apologies that came after consequences. If she was truly sorry, she should never have done it. Alicia refused to see or speak to her mother at all in those early months. When Darlene attempted to approach her at school one afternoon, cornering her in a quiet hallway, it did not go well. That evening, Alicia recounted the encounter to me once she'd calmed down from tears of rage. She asked if we were over our little snit yet, Alicia said, eyes flashing, like we were just pouting for no reason. She said the affair didn't mean anything. It was just sex. My daughter practically spat the words in disgust. She said she still loves us. What a joke. I felt my fists clench involuntarily as I listened. I could imagine the scene. Darlene probably trying to downplay her betrayal, as if it was a minor indiscretion we should all just get past. Alicia told me she had let her mother have it, right there in the classroom. I told her she gave you up for something not even worth it, that she walked away from you and from me and doesn't get to pretend it was nothing. Her voice trembled with emotion. Dad, I told her you don't love her anymore. I said she killed that love with what she did. Tears prickled in my eyes. I reached across the kitchen table and took Alicia's hand. I'm sorry you had to go through that, I said softly. You shouldn't have to be the one explaining consequences to your own mother. Alicia squeezed my hand. She needed to hear it. She asked me, what can I do? Like she was the victim, I told her, nothing. There's nothing you can do to fix this. I nodded, heart heavy with pride and sorrow. In truth, Alicia had spoken accurately. The love I once had for Darlene, it was gone. Perhaps a shred of care lingered. I didn't wish her harm physically, but any romantic or intimate love had been thoroughly destroyed the moment she chose her selfish path. Darlene herself had salted the earth of our marriage. Nothing would ever grow there again. After that confrontation, Darlene finally seemed to grasp the enormity of what she'd done. The divorce process dragged on for nearly a year and a half, mainly because Darlene kept stalling and pleading for reconciliation. She'd agree to terms one day and backtrack the next, suddenly tearful and begging me to take her back instead of divorcing. It was pathetic and exhausting. I let my lawyer handle most interactions, though I had to sit through a mediation session or two where Darlene cried and professed how empty her life was without us. I sat stone-faced through her appeals, speaking only to the business at hand. Inside, it did hurt. How could it not to see someone I once loved reduced to this? But I reminded myself that her pain was self-inflicted. She mourned not having us, but apparently not enough to have kept us in the first place. Legally, things ended in my favor thanks to careful strategy and, frankly, Darlene's own actions. The mountain of evidence made her eager to avoid a court trial that would air her sins in public record. In the end, she conceded to most of my terms. I kept the house, though I later chose to sell it. splitting a modest portion of equity with her as agreed. We split our savings roughly 70/30ths, with the larger share to me and Alicia's college fund secured before division. Darlene received a smaller portion of my retirement accounts than she might have, largely because Tyler threatened to subpoena Garrett and other witnesses if she pressed for more. The implied scandal of that seemed to cow her. Crucially, I got full physical custody of Alicia. Darlene was granted only what the courts term reasonable visitation, but since Alicia was 18 by the time the divorce finalized, visitation was moot. Our daughter was old enough to decide her own contact, and she chose none beyond an occasional terse text. Professionally and financially, Darlene paid a steep price as well. Word of the affair had spread through the school grapevine even before the end of that year. Students whispered, colleagues gossiped. A few of Alicia's classmates cruelly teased her about her slutty mom, compounding my daughter's humiliation. When the school board caught wind that the vice principal was fornicating with a teacher under his supervision, an investigation was launched. Both Garrett McDonnell and Darlene quietly resigned from Westbrook High in exchange for the board not pursuing a very public morals scandal. It saved the school from a media circus, but it cost them their positions. Garrett's longtime career in education effectively ended that day. No reputable school district would hire a man with that kind of baggage. Last I heard, he left town entirely, presumably to slink into some new community where his reputation wasn't ruined. As for Darlene, she was effectively blacklisted from the local school circuit. Her bright teaching career abruptly dimmed. She eventually found a job at a small private tutoring center, far from the leadership roles and accolades she once had. The affair that she claimed meant nothing had obliterated 20 years of professional respect she'd earned, not to mention the respect of friends and family. Her parents, my former in-laws, were especially devastated. Darlene was their only child, and they struggled to reconcile the woman they'd thought she was with the one who cheated on her family. I remember her father calling me, voice heavy with shame and apology, saying, "Son, I don't know what to say. This isn't how we raised her." I truly felt for them. I assured him I didn't hold them responsible. Darlene's choices were her own, but it did drive a wedge in their relationship. For months, they barely spoke to her. Darlene had not only lost her husband and child, she'd severely damaged the bond with her own parents. Through all this, I focused on building a new life for Alicia and me. We sold the old house, too many memories in those walls, and moved to a quiet townhouse in a gated community. It was a fresh start. Alicia graduated high school with honors, despite the emotional turmoil of that year. I couldn't have been prouder as I sat in the audience at her graduation, cheering as she walked across the stage. Darlene attended the ceremony too, I later learned, but kept to the shadows at the back of the auditorium. She knew better than to approach us that day. Despite everything, I encouraged Alicia not to let anger consume her. "Don't become bitter because of what your mother did," I often told her. "Learn from it. Be better in your own life." She took those words to heart. Ironically, Darlene's betrayal taught our daughter exactly how not to treat a partner. Alicia went on to have a loving, trusting relationship with her childhood sweetheart, Daniel. By the time they married a couple years later, Alicia had made peace with inviting her mother to the wedding. Well, invite is a strong word. We informed Darlene of the church and time, allowing her to attend discreetly. She sat in the back pew, dabbing her eyes, and slipped out quietly after the ceremony without even approaching the receiving line. Perhaps she knew she wasn't welcome in the intimate family celebration that followed. I won't pretend I didn't feel a pang of pity seeing her there alone, watching from a distance as our daughter married her first love. Once upon a time, I had pictured Darlene and I standing side by side proudly on that day, parents of the bride. Instead, I stood with my arm around Alicia's shoulder in photos, while Darlene was a ghost at the back of the church. Such are the wages of betrayal. Meanwhile, I flourished in ways I never expected. In the wake of the divorce, perhaps to cope, I threw myself into my career in educational administration. The focus paid off. Within a year, I was promoted to director of curriculum for the city's school district. The increase in salary and prestige was welcome, but I didn't stop there. With Darlene entirely out of my personal life, I had freedom to take some risks. On a whim, or maybe fate, I started a side business, developing a supplemental online learning program for high schoolers. To my astonishment, the program took off in a big way. By the second year, I had investors and a burgeoning startup on my hands. Fate, it seemed, had a sense of irony. Shortly after what would have been our 20th anniversary, I hit a streak of extraordinary luck. For my birthday, my brother Dave gave me a scratch-off lottery ticket as a gag gift. I nearly fainted when I realized it was a $100,000 winner. I used that windfall to pay off the remainder of Alicia's college tuition and invest heavily in my startup. That little company grew into a national platform over the next few years, eventually earning me more money than I'd ever dreamed of as a humble school administrator. By age 50, I was the founder and CEO of a successful education tech firm, a respected figure in our community, and a proud father and grandfather. Alicia and Daniel gave me 2 beautiful grandkids in due time. I had rebuilt my life from the ground up, stronger than before. If you had asked me in the first miserable weeks after Darlene's affair whether I would ever be happy again, I probably would have said no. But here I was, happy, content, and free. What of Darlene? She lived a very different life in those years. After her string of boyfriends and short-lived flings, none of which filled the void, she eventually ended up alone. She moved into a modest apartment across town and scraped by with her tutoring job. To her credit, she never married Garrett or any other man. I suspect trust was as much an issue for her as it was for me. Who would trust her after all? And perhaps she finally realized no thrill could match what she'd lost. At first, Darlene tried to keep up appearances, showing off a new beau every so often to mutual acquaintances. But those who knew her well saw through it. Her eyes lost that spark of pride I remembered. In pictures, she looked strained, as if forcing a smile. My ex-wife was learning, day by day, the cost of her one small adventure. She had won the freedom to chase excitement, but it left her with nothing of value at the end. Over the years, Darlene made a few timid attempts to reconcile on a human level. She'd send a Christmas card with a remorseful note, or approach me briefly at one of Alicia's milestone events to say hello. I remained civil but distant. I had no interest in friendship or deep talks. I was polite for Alicia's sake whenever we found ourselves in the same room, but that was the extent of it. Darlene understood and respected my boundaries eventually. Perhaps the greatest punishment for her was truly feeling the loss of my warmth, to be treated with cool formality by someone who once adored you. Despite my personal success and relative peace, I'd be lying if I said I let go of the idea of revenge entirely. Yes, I had already dealt her severe consequences through the divorce and fallout. But a part of me, the hurt, betrayed man inside, craved a moment of triumph, a moment where I could look her in the eye and watch her finally break. I wanted her to feel in her soul the humiliation and pain she had inflicted. So as the years rolled on, I quietly kept that ember of retribution alive. I waited, patiently, for the right opportunity. Darlene's life was already diminished, but not yet completely ruined. She still had some dignity left in public, some shred of hope perhaps that one day she might regain respectability or even my forgiveness. I intended to snuff that hope out for good. The chance came unexpectedly a decade later. Alicia, bless her heart, had never fully forgiven her mother, but she had softened enough to maintain occasional contact. It was through Alicia that I learned Darlene had been struggling financially. Medical bills from a minor surgery had piled up, and with her meager income, she was drowning in debt. Out of desperation, Darlene was considering filing for bankruptcy. When Alicia hesitantly relayed this to me, I could see conflict in her eyes. Despite everything, she didn't truly want her mother destitute. My daughter had a good heart. I embraced her and assured that I would never let her mother end up on the streets. For Alicia's sake, I'd quietly help if it came to that. But inside, another idea glinted. I had more wealth than I knew what to do with by that time. Helping Darlene financially wouldn't hurt me in the slightest. However, money was only part of the equation. The deeper issue was her public image. While those close to the situation knew of her disgrace, a wider circle did not. She had managed to keep the details relatively private. Many casual friends only knew we divorced and grew apart. Darlene had never been publicly called out for the affair aside from whispers. I realized then what the ultimate revenge could be. I would engineer a situation where Darlene would publicly confess her wrongdoing and be utterly humiliated, while thinking it was her own idea. And I would do it under the guise of magnanimity, so she'd never see the knife coming. The plan formed slowly, over months of careful setup. First, I had Alicia suggest to Darlene that perhaps I was mellowing with age and success, that maybe after all this time I might be open to a conversation, maybe even something like forgiveness. My daughter was perplexed at first, but she caught on when she saw the determined glint in my eye. She didn't know the details, but she knew I was up to something calculated. She trusted me enough to play along. Next, I arranged a chance encounter. It was easy enough. I invited Darlene's parents and a few mutual acquaintances to a charity gala my company sponsored, knowing word would get back to her. As expected, Darlene finagled an invitation through her parents, likely hoping to bump into me there. And bump into me she did. I was courteous, even warm when we chatted. I let her see me laugh and reminisce with her father, treated her politely in conversation, and let a subtle hint drop. We should catch up properly soon, Darlene. It's been a long time. Her eyes lit up with cautious optimism. The bait was set. A week later, I had flowers delivered to her apartment with a simple note. "Let's meet, Michael." I knew this gesture would send her heart soaring, and sure enough, she contacted Alicia in a flutter of excitement, asking if I really meant it. Alicia played her part, saying I had indeed spoken of forgiving the past and wanting closure. Finally, I made my move. I sent Darlene a formal invitation to an anniversary celebration. The gold-embossed card read, "Please join me in celebrating a renewed chapter, Michael and Darlene, 25th wedding anniversary reaffirmation." The date, 2 months away, coincided with what would have been our 25th anniversary. I knew she would be stunned. I had never acknowledged the date post-divorce. In the invitation, I wrote that I wanted to publicly renew our vows, to show that after all the struggle, forgiveness, and love prevailed. It was an outrageous gambit. Would she accept? Part of me thought she might be too suspicious or guilty to agree, but I underestimated how deeply Darlene yearned for redemption. Within a day, I received a trembling phone call from her. It was the first time I'd heard her voice directed at me personally in nearly a decade. "Michael, is this for real?" she asked, voice already choked with tears of tentative joy. I clenched the phone, closing my eyes to prepare for the role of a lifetime. "Yes," I said gently. "I've been thinking a lot, Darlene. Life is too short to hold on to anger. We shared so many years. I'd like to try to mend things, even if just as friends who honor what we had." The lie slid smoothly off my tongue, sugar-coated and believable. On the other end, Darlene burst into sobs of gratitude. She apologized profusely, real apologies this time, no excuses. She said not a day had gone by that she hadn't regretted her actions. I let her pour her heart out for a while, offering a few kind "I know" and "it's okay" responses, as if comforting her. It sickened me a bit, to be frank. Some tiny, buried part of me perhaps did pity her in that moment. But I snuffed that out quickly by recalling the image of her driving off with Garrett as I stood shattered in the doorway. This was justice long overdue. We agreed to meet in person to discuss the event. Over lunch at a quiet restaurant, I laid out a charade of a plan, a small ceremony at the Botanical Gardens, just close family and friends. We would say a few words about forgiveness, maybe even exchange new rings as a symbol of new beginnings. I had to swallow back bile describing this fairy tale scenario. Darlene listened with a rapt, disbelieving smile, tears in her eyes as she nodded at each idea. "Michael, I don't deserve this, but I promise I'll spend the rest of my life making it up to you," she said, reaching across the table to place her hand over mine. I managed not to recoil. Her hand felt thinner, frailer than I remembered. Age and stress had taken a toll. Faint wrinkles creased the corners of her once bright eyes. For a fleeting second, I felt a ghost of the old affection. This woman and I had built a family once. But then I thought of Alicia's tears, of my own nights alone, of the humiliation and rage. No, this ends on my terms. I gave her hand a gentle squeeze and smiled. "Let's just focus on moving forward," I murmured. Over the next several weeks, the preparations for our reaffirmation ceremony proceeded. I involved Darlene in each step, letting her feel increasingly secure that this was real. We even met with a counselor a few times, at my suggestion, to work through lingering issues. It sounds absurd, I know, marriage counseling years after divorce. But it served a purpose. It lulled her into thinking I genuinely wanted an emotional reconciliation. In those sessions, I spoke of the hurt I'd carried and how I was trying to let it go. Darlene wept and said she was so grateful I was giving her this chance to apologize properly. She had no idea that I recorded those counseling sessions. I wanted every admission on tape, just in case she tried to squirm out of things later. Her voice, pleading and guilty, that would be my insurance policy. As the date approached, I carefully curated the guest list. I invited our family members, including her parents and my siblings, most of whom were utterly shocked to hear we were apparently reconciling. I kept it secret from most friends until the invitations went out, wanting to maximize the surprise. I also invited a few of Darlene's old colleagues from the school, people who only knew vague rumors of our split. And, importantly, I ensured a couple of key figures would be there, members of the school board and community leaders with whom I had developed ties through my work and philanthropy. In effect, an audience of people before whom Darlene would keenly feel either triumph or shame. She likely assumed I invited them to show off our happy reunion. In reality, I wanted maximum witness to her downfall. I did not extend an invitation to Garrett MacDonald. There was no need. He was long gone from our lives. A footnote both Darlene and I wanted to forget for different reasons. His ruin was already complete. I'd heard through the grapevine he never found a stable job again and had been divorced twice since. I was content to let that sleeping dog lie. Tonight was about Darlene and me. On the morning of the event, I stood in front of the mirror adjusting my silver tie. I looked sharp. Years of personal training, another post-divorce habit, had kept me fit, and the tailored charcoal suit fit like a glove. I looked every bit the thriving, gracious man who was ready to welcome his wayward spouse back into his arms. It was almost scary how convincing I appeared, even to myself. Alicia stepped up behind me in the mirror's reflection. She wore a simple blue dress and looked equal parts anxious and excited. "Dad, are you absolutely sure about this?" she asked quietly. She knew the broad strokes, that this reconciliation was not sincere, that I had a final play in mind. But I spared her the details to keep her reaction genuine. I turned and cupped my daughter's cheek gently. "I'm sure," I said. "After today, your mother will finally face the full consequences of her choices, and we can put this all behind us forever." Alicia searched my face, then nodded. "Okay, I trust you. I'll be glad when it's over." She hesitated, then added, "Part of me still feels bad for her, Dad, even after everything." I gave a faint smile. Alicia's compassion was her finest trait. "I know, and that's why you're a better person than she was. But don't worry. Nothing I do today will harm her physically. It will only ensure the truth is known. She earned that outcome." With that, we headed out to the venue. The botanical gardens were a beautiful expanse of autumn blooms and golden light. We had set up the ceremony in a gazebo overlooking a small pond. Chairs were arranged in neat rows for about 50 guests. It was intimate but enough to fill with the important people from our lives. As guests arrived, I played the role of welcoming host. Many approached me with bewildered but delighted expressions, congratulating me on finding your way back to each other. I smiled modestly, saying things like, "Time heals wounds, we've grown," and other banalities. If any detected a note of irony in my tone, they didn't mention it. Darlene's parents both hugged me, tears in their eyes, thanking me for giving their daughter another chance. I merely nodded, thinking, if only you knew. Tyler, my lawyer friend, was there too, along with Dave and a few close confidants who did know what was coming. They stayed on the periphery, letting me steer the day. Finally, Darlene arrived, and a hush fell. She appeared at the top of the stone path in a cream-colored lace dress that flowed to her knees. It was simple and elegant. Ironically, the same dress she had worn to our 20th anniversary dinner long ago. She'd chosen it deliberately, I'm sure, as a symbol of happier times. I saw how her hands trembled slightly around the bouquet of lilies she carried. Lilies again, full circle. But her face shone with hope and nervous joy. The small string quartet I'd hired began to play Pachelbel's canon. Darlene walked down the aisle slowly, accompanied not by a father figure, her elderly dad walked behind as a guest, but by Alicia on one side and a cousin on the other. Alicia had volunteered to escort her mother, which touched Darlene greatly. My daughter, for her part, maintained a neutral expression, but I saw her jaw tighten as she approached with the woman who had caused so much harm. This was Alicia's final act of grace towards her mother, and I knew it. After today, she might not feel so generous. I stood waiting under the gazebo, just as I was now, in the present moment of my recollection. The guests all turned to watch the bride's approach, though bride felt like an odd concept in this context. I took a deep breath, schooling my features into a mask of tenderness. Darlene reached me and Alicia gave my hand a quick squeeze before stepping aside to join the front row. Her eyes searched mine with a flicker of concern. I gave the slightest nod. "It's all right. Trust me." She sat, and it was just Darlene and me standing before our gathered witnesses. Up close, Darlene looked a bit unsteady. Her eyes were already wet. I could almost see the thoughts swirling in her head. Disbelief that this was happening, relief, gratitude. I offered my arm to steady her, which she gratefully took. The officiant, a secular celebrant I'd hired for the occasion, began with a warm welcome and a little speech about love enduring hardships. I barely heard it. My heart was thumping so loudly, I wondered if the guests could see my chest pounding under my jacket. The moment of truth was approaching. We had agreed to say a few personal words to each other before renewing our vows. Darlene insisted I go last. She wanted me to have the final say as a sign of respect, she said. That suited me perfectly. I let her speak first. She turned to face me and took both my hands in hers. "Michael," she began, voice wavering, "I stand here today amazed and humbled. I truly never thought I'd have this chance to speak to you from my heart, in front of everyone we love, and ask you to forgive me." Her voice caught on a sob, and a tear rolled down her cheek. The crowd was silent, rapt. Many leaned in, visibly moved by her raw emotion. Darlene took a shaky breath and continued. I betrayed you. I broke the vows we made so many years ago, and I broke our family's trust. Not a day has passed since that I haven't regretted it. The guilt and shame I carry, it's something I will bear forever. She squeezed my hands. I maintained gentle eye contact, giving her a slight nod of encouragement, as if to say, "Go on." "You gave me everything, and I threw it away," Darlene said, voice louder now, determined that all hear her. "There are no excuses for what I did. It was selfish and wrong, and I hurt the people I love the most. Michael, you begged me not to go, and I didn't listen. Alicia," she looked toward our daughter, "you begged me, and I still went. I will never forgive myself for that." Alicia's face was stoic, but I saw tears shining in her eyes. Others in the audience were openly crying at this emotional confession. Darlene turned back to me. "Yet here you are, showing me mercy I know I don't deserve. You have become such an incredible man, successful, kind, a wonderful father and now grandfather. I am so proud of you, and so sorry that I wasn't by your side while you achieved all this." She reached one hand up and lightly touched my cheek. I fought the urge to pull away. "If you let me, I promise to honor you the rest of my days, to be faithful, to support you in all things. I know I can't undo the past, but I swear I will never betray your trust again." She was full on crying now, and a few guests quietly dabbed their eyes as well. It was quite a performance, I'll admit. One she sincerely felt, no doubt. Once, such a heartfelt apology might have moved me. But today I felt only grim satisfaction. She was laying herself low before me and everyone, taking full accountability. This was exactly what I wanted. Her complete capitulation, made public. Darlene finished with a whisper. "Thank you, Michael, for loving me despite my faults. I love you so much." There was a collective sigh from the audience. To them, this was a cathartic reconciliation, the prodigal wife coming home in dramatic fashion. I even heard a soft sob from her mother in the second row. I gently wiped a tear from Darlene's cheek. How tender it must have looked. and readied myself to speak. This was it. I drew in a breath, letting a weighted pause hang in the air. "My dear Darlene," I began softly, "thank you for your words. They mean more to me than you know." I glanced out at the audience, at all the expectant faces. I saw Tyler watching intently, his mouth set in a firm line. Alicia looked nervous, perhaps sensing a shift in the atmosphere. I continued, raising my voice just a touch. "We have indeed been through a lot. Many of you here know the broad story. Darlene and I drifted apart. Mistakes were made." I squeezed her hand. "Today is about honesty and forgiveness. So in that spirit, I need to be completely honest with everyone here about what happened and why I've decided to hold this ceremony." Darlene looked at me with a flicker of confusion crossing her tear-streaked face. That wasn't in our planned remarks, but she likely assumed I wanted to explain or justify our past to the guests. She gave me a tentative smile and a nod, trusting I was still on script. I gently disengaged my hands from hers and took a half step forward, addressing the crowd directly. 15 years ago, I was a happy husband and father. I loved my wife and child more than anything. Then one day, I found out the unthinkable. Darlene was having an affair. A ripple of shock and murmurs coursed through the audience, even though some surely had guessed. We had never openly discussed it in public until now. I heard one of Darlene's old friends gasp, covering her mouth. Darlene herself stiffened beside me. She reached for my arm as if to tug me back, but I continued, my voice growing firmer. She didn't just have a brief lapse. No, she planned an entire weekend with another man, right under my nose, and looked me in the eye and lied about it. She abandoned me and our daughter to be with him. The murmuring grew louder. Darlene's face had drained of color. "Michael, what are you doing?" she whispered, a tremor of panic in her voice. I turned to her, and for the first time in this charade, I dropped the loving facade. I let her see the cold, hard vindication in my eyes. I saw her flinch as realization hit, but there was no stopping now. I gently removed the lapel microphone that had been recording our vows and held it in my hand, raising it so all could hear clearly. "What am I doing?" I echoed, loud enough for everyone to hear. "I'm doing what I should have done years ago, telling the full truth." I faced the guests again, who were now a captive, bewildered audience to an unexpected drama. Many of you have heard a sanitized version of our story, that we separated, that Darlene made a mistake which I forgave. But you deserve to know what really happened, and what kind of person I'm recommitting myself to. I allowed a bitter note to color those words. Today. Darlene's eyes flashed with desperation. She suddenly lunged to grab the microphone from my hand, but I anticipated that. I stepped out of her reach. Into the mic, I said sharply, "Don't." The single word rang out, freezing her in place. Years of planning had led to this moment, and I commanded it with an authority even I hadn't known I possessed. Darlene stood rooted, trembling, as I unleashed the truth to all. Darlene had an affair with her boss, a man who preyed on young women. She didn't slip once. She carried on for months behind my back. When confronted, she chose him over her family. She left despite our pleas. I gestured toward Alicia, who looked stunned but resolute. She'd wanted the truth out there too, after all. She broke our daughter's heart and mine, and for what? For a thrill with a creep who tossed her aside not even 6 months later. Darlene's father had stood up, his face pained, as if wanting to intervene, but her mother held him back, tears on her cheeks. Others were whispering fiercely, looks of disillusionment aimed at Darlene. She shook her head wildly, mascara running. "Please stop," she begged me, voice cracking. I did not stop. This was the culmination of my vengeance, her public disgrace, complete and absolute. When she realized her mistake, I continued mercilessly. She tried to come home, but I had already closed that door. I filed for divorce. I secured custody of our child, and I ensured she got as little as possible of our assets. A few gasps, some from those who thought me cruel just then. I didn't care. They needed to grasp the depth of betrayal. I had every right to. Adultery may not be illegal, but it's certainly grounds to lose one's entitlement to a partner's trust and resources. Darlene let out a choked sob. She stepped toward me, shaking her head. "Michael, please. I'm sorry. I thought you forgave me." Her voice broke into a wail. I met her gaze with steely resolve. "You thought wrong." My words dropped like lead. Turning to the guests once more, I raised the microphone. This event, this so-called vow renewal, was never truly about forgiveness. It was about exposing the truth and ensuring that Darlene and I both move forward without illusions. I swept my arm in a slight arc, indicating the decor, the setting. I orchestrated all of this to bring closure, not through a sweet lie of reconciliation, but through the unvarnished truth. The officiant had long since stepped aside, looking uncomfortable. The quartet had gone silent, one violinist's mouth agape. In the front row, I saw Tyler looking grimly satisfied, arms crossed. Dave gave me a small nod of support. Alicia. My dear Alicia had tears streaming, but she gave me a trembling smile. She understood. This needed to happen. I took a step toward Darlene, lowering my voice but still audible. "Darlene, I meant what I said about not holding on to anger. After today, I won't hate you. I genuinely hope you find some peace, but I will never be with you again. I remain single by choice, because I learned to value myself more than to accept what you did." She was openly weeping, her entire body quaking. How could you do this to me in front of everyone?" she managed to cry out. I felt a flare of indignation at that. "How could I do this to you?" I echoed. "This is nothing compared to what you did to me and Alicia. You killed our life and never faced public consequence for it. Did you think I'd just forget?" I gestured toward the crowd. "These people here, many of them never knew how badly you betrayed your vows. You've been able to hide it, to play the victim of a simple divorce. Well, now they know." She covered her face with her hands, shoulders hunched in shame. The weight of dozens of eyes on her, judging, was palpable. Her humiliation was complete. You could almost see it crushing her. There was a long, heavy silence. Only her muffled sobs and the rustle of the breeze in the trees could be heard. I stepped back to the mic stand and placed the microphone back in its holder. Then I adjusted my jacket, took a breath, and addressed the audience one last time, my tone calm and clear. "I apologize if this was uncomfortable to witness," I said, scanning the stunned faces. "But I don't actually apologize for telling the truth. For too long I lived under the shadow of this pain while others thought something else entirely. Now it's all in the open. There will be no vow renewal today." I gave a faint, wry smile. "Instead, consider this ceremony a final farewell." With that, I turned on my heel and offered my arm to Alicia in the front row. She rose and took it, squeezing tight. Together we began walking up the aisle, leaving Darlene crumpled and sobbing under the gazebo, and dozens of speechless guests in our wake. No one tried to stop us. In fact, after a moment, My brother Dave hurried to our side to escort Alicia on her other side, and Tyler fell in step too, providing a sort of honor guard. I heard some scurrying and murmuring behind, likely Darlene's parents rushing to console their collapsed daughter, or guests whispering in shock. But I did not look back. I had done what I came to do. As we cleared the pavilion and reached the entrance of the gardens, I let out a long exhale. A tremendous weight lifted off me in that instant. Alicia looked up at me, her eyes red but a curious relief on her face. "Dad, wow," she breathed. "I can't believe you pulled that off." I turned to her and gently wiped a tear from her cheek. "Are you all right?" I asked softly. She nodded. "Yes, I think I am. It was hard to watch, but she needed to face it." Alicia swallowed. "I feel free of it now. Is that weird?" "Not weird at all," Dave chimed in with a supportive smile. "She had it coming, kiddo. Both of you can move on now, without that hanging over you." Tyler clapped a hand on my shoulder. "Hell of a show, Mike," he said quietly. "Brutal, but hell of a show." I gave him a faint grin. "Thanks, and thank you all for understanding." We left the venue behind, each of us heading to our cars. The sun was just beginning to set, painting the sky in oranges and purples. It should have been a romantic twilight for a vow renewal, but instead it felt like the closing scene of a long, dramatic play. As I drove away with Alicia beside me, I glanced in the rearview mirror at the receding gardens. A figure in cream lace was visible at the gazebo, supported by her parents as she stumbled down the steps. Part of me felt a twinge of sympathy seeing Darlene so broken. But I reminded myself firmly, she authored her own tragedy. All I did was write the epilogue. In the weeks that followed, the fallout was intense. The story of our renewal turned revelation became something of a scandalous legend in our social circles. Some judged me harshly for humiliating Darlene so publicly, saying I should have just let sleeping dogs lie. But those closest to me, who knew the whole journey, defended me. They pointed out how long I'd held my silence, how dignified I'd been all these years while Darlene quietly played the aggrieved party, or at least downplayed her fault. Perhaps it wasn't the kindest way to handle it, but it was certainly effective. Darlene, as expected, was utterly shattered by the event. She did indeed end up filing for bankruptcy shortly after. Her financial troubles had only worsened, and any hope of me bailing her out was clearly gone. She practically went into hiding to avoid facing anyone who was at the ceremony. I heard from her mother that she was seeking therapy intensively now, trying to cope with the humiliation and guilt. I sincerely hoped she would find some way to rebuild her life after this. Not out of love, but because she's still the mother of my child, and I didn't wish her total ruin as a human being. Only accountability, which she now had in full. Her lover, Garrett, remained a ghost of the past, uninvolved in this chapter. For all I knew, he never even heard about the stunt I pulled. It didn't matter. He had ceased to have any power over us long ago. The most important thing was that Alicia and I found closure. In the days after, she told me she felt like a decade-old wound had finally healed clean. "It's like everything is out there now," she said. "No more secrets. I can finally stop being angry because it's done." She even visited her mother once, at her grandparents' request, just to check on her. Alicia reported that Darlene looked unwell, pale, puffy eyes, but was subdued and apologetic to her. Perhaps, having lost the facade, Darlene would focus on genuine self-improvement. One can hope. As for me, I carried on with my life, as single and successful as ever. The company kept growing. My grandchildren kept me young. and I enjoyed the peace of mind that came with knowing I had seen justice done. I did go on a few dates here and there in subsequent years, but I always found myself holding back from anything serious. Trust, once shattered, is hard to rebuild with someone new. And truthfully, I found I liked my independence. I answered to no one. My finances were mine alone, and I could pursue my interests, philanthropy, travel, spoiling the grandkids, without compromise. One crisp evening a couple of years after the long game, as Dave jokingly called my revenge plan, I sat on the porch of my home watching the sunset. Alicia was visiting with her children, who played in the yard. I sipped a glass of bourbon and felt for the first time in a long time, completely at peace. Darlene's life, I'd heard, had stabilized into something quiet and humble. She found work as a receptionist at a small firm after the tutoring center closed, and lived in a tiny rental unit. She had no romantic attachments to speak of. In some sense, I think she embraced a sort of penance, living simply, avoiding the temptations that once led her astray. We hadn't spoken since that day in the gardens, and I doubted we ever would beyond a stiff greeting at inevitable family events. And that was fine by me. I bore her no active malice anymore. In fact, in my own way, I forgave her, not to let her back in, but to let myself be free. Free of the hurt, the resentment, the longing for revenge. I'd had my revenge. It was thorough and complete. Now I could release the remaining negativity and live the rest of my days with a lighter heart. As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky a gentle pink, my granddaughter toddled up to me with a dandelion puff in her chubby hand. "Grandpa, make a wish," she lisped, holding it up. I leaned down and blew, sending the seeds dancing off into the breeze. What did I wish for? I had everything I needed. I'd won, in the end, on my terms. Perhaps I only wished for continued peace and happiness for my loved ones. I scooped my granddaughter into my lap and smiled as her laughter rang out. Inside the house, I saw Alicia through the window, chatting with her husband and her brother who had dropped by. She caught my eye and flashed me a warm, loving smile. The same smile I used to see on her face before our family was broken, now fully returned. At that moment, I realized something profound. By orchestrating Darlene's downfall, I hadn't just gotten revenge. I had reclaimed our story. No longer were we defined by her betrayal. We were defined by how we overcame it. Alicia and I through resilience and truth. Darlene through facing consequences and perhaps finding humility. It wasn't a fairy tale ending, no. It was messy and painful, but it was real. And as I held my grandchild close, listening to the soft whisper of wind chimes on the porch, I felt contentment wash over me. The long saga was finally over. Justice was served. Life, with all its scars and lessons, was moving on. I remained single, I remained successful, but most importantly, I remained true to myself and those who truly loved me. In the end, that was the greatest victory of all.